Dear students, in this session we will begin from page number 150, paragraph number 2. Here the author talks about the classifications made in literary history, the discussion of which he had begun in the previous pages. Let us see what is there in this paragraph. It is not time alone that works against marginalized peoples and texts, but literary history's classifications as well. A text cannot be a history. Its narrative may identify an idea or value system as the dominant feature of a period. Such standardizations naturalize fields of perception and appreciation, thereby producing a normative literary history. So he talks about the classification of literary texts into different periods. If we do so, we are making some texts as part of history. Literary texts are not created to become a part of history. They are also relevant in the present. Such standardizations refers to there is a tendency of limiting the scope of a particular literary text to that particular period. That kind of criteria or criterion that we make of limiting that particular text to that particular period is called what? Standardization. So such standardizations naturalize fields of perception and appreciation, thereby producing a normative literary history. So here the meaning of normative is given. Okay, normative. It is given there in page number 154. In accordance with existing norms, general conventions. So a text is seen with a particular traditional sense or in the conventional sense. In Malayalam, it was Savarna aesthetic that became lauded as the literary mainstream. Laud here, appreciate or praise. The meaning of laud is that. So for example, he talks about such kinds of classifications of the aesthetic. In Malayalam, what had occurred? In Malayalam, it was Savarna aesthetic that became appreciated or praised as the literary mainstream. Panan Paattu, Parayan Paattu, Pulayan Paattu, Mappila Paattu and Vedan Paattu are, for instance, marked by extra literary concerns or by their caste names. So there is a reference to Paattu. Okay, note number 6. Paattu means a song in Dravidian meter. They are caste-specific songs. Sometimes it can also be categorized as belonging to an ethnic group, religious community, etc. So they are caste-specific songs of varied themes, often reflecting the ethos of the community in relation to existing social conditions. So there are different songs existed there, caste-specific songs. All those songs are actually part of literary texts, but those songs are labeled with caste names and they are relegated to the margins or they are avoided from the literary mainstream and they are given caste-specific names such as Panan Paattu, Parayan Paattu, Pulayan Paattu, Mappila Paattu and Vedan Paattu. Such a classificatory method adopted by literary history precluded the possibility of later social movements from accepting a wide range of cultural forms as common capital. So this is what he says. According to the author, such classifications tend to limit the potential of the texts. And with that very naming of the classifications, certain texts are considered as lower to the mainstream aesthetic in Malayalam. While Malayalam literary history classified lower caste art and literature under caste names, the upper caste practices were determined as mainstream. Can a history which denigrated some arts as caste arts while celebrating others as mainstream be considered democratic? So the author asks a question here. Some aesthetics are considered as mainstream aesthetic and some are considered as inferior, and they are often associated with caste names. The inferior aesthetic is often associated with caste name. Then can we consider such a literary history, such a tradition as democratic? No, we cannot consider it as democratic. Especially when all the native art forms of Kerala have caste associations. The fact that all the so-called mainstream arts are associated, even dominated by upper castes, but not referred to by their caste names, questions the innocence of such nomenclatures. Here, the author is pointing towards that innocence of writing history or innocence of making such classifications or naming to different sections of the aesthetic in Malayalam literature. So it is not innocence actually, it is a kind of power politics. How many are the lower castes in Kathakali or Kudiyattam? How much of lower caste lives find representation in their historical and aesthetic elements? The Kerala identity is indeed informed by an othering of lower caste life. Underline. So this is what is happening in the literary history of Kerala or Malayalam writing. The traditional literary history consider the lower caste as the other, and there is a domination of the Savarna aesthetic. Hence, everything and anything that did not belong to the lower caste became the mainstream. Is Keraliyada the tradition of an upper caste aesthetic and history, especially since they form only 8% of Kerala's total population? So another question is asked by the author. The upper caste aesthetic or the Savarna aesthetic, it is produced by only 8% of Kerala's population, 8% of writers of Kerala population. So can we give it the dominant position? Is that what we call Keraliyada? That is asked by the author. Note number 7, Keraliyada. Features pertaining to the culture of Kerala. Often hijacked and equated with mores, rituals, and artistic expressions of the upper caste, the persistent appearance of the Kathakali image in brochures that promote Kerala tourism is a case in point. So here, Keraliyada. The moment that we talk about Keraliyada, we can see Kathakali, the image of Kathakali, the image of Kudiyattam, the image of Bharatanatyam. Okay, likewise, we don't find any Parayan Paattu or Panan Paattu or Mappila Paattu as and when we hear about Keraliyada. So here, the author is asking a very pertinent question, that is, can the upper caste aesthetic and history be considered as Kerala's total population as a mark of Keraliyada? How is mainstream culture and art then defined? Ullur's literary history underscores the point. Ullur, there is a reference to. Note number 8. 5-volume Kerala Sahitya Charitram, Literary History of Kerala, 1953 is to a great extent a biased literary history which regards literature as an upper caste domain. So here, what is he pointing about? Ulloor's literary history underscores the point. The eligibility criteria of the literary history of the 17th, 18th and 19th centuries found only one Jeevan and two Kaniyans as worthy of mention. So the traditional history book that we see in 5 volumes, they can only see some of the very few persons belonging to the lower strata of society. One Jeevan and two Kaniyans. Okay, Kaniyans is a caste once regarded as belonging to the lower rungs of the hierarchical society. If so, who ripped off the social cultural assets of the Dalits who form the majority of the population? So if Kerala history is giving importance to the Savarna aesthetic or the upper caste aesthetic, then who had made the other social cultural assets, that is the writings of the Dalits, who made those writings inferior? So that is a main question. And actually the Dalit writing, it becomes the major writing or the majority of the writings that had occurred in Malayalam. Therefore, any attempt to include the contribution of the occluded Dalit community has to be welcomed as the essential process of democracy. So according to the author, if we have to find democracy in the writing of literary history in Malayalam, we have to find the voices of the marginalized also, the voices of the Dalits also. On the other hand, those who continue to see such attempts as communal or sectarian take a twisted view of literary history. So those who respect the voices of all, irrespective of the caste, those people can find an impartial interpretation of literary history. All other persons, they will be popularizing a communal, sectarian and twisted view of literary history. So in this section, we get an idea of the classification of literary history and also the namings. And we also get to know more about the mainstream aesthetic in Malayalam literature and also the problem behind such kind of interpretations happening in literary history. With this, I conclude this session. We will continue the chapter in the coming sessions. Thank you.